What if the most terrifying place on Earth wasn't a haunted house or a war zone, but a perfectly ordinary office? Welcome to your first day. Your guide speaks in the same calm tone, whether explaining voicemail or revealing who among your co-workers is a serial killer.
Those are the offices, and these are the cubicles. That's my cubicle there, and this is your cubicle. This is your phone. Never answer your phone. Let the voicemail system answer it. There are no personal phone calls allowed. We do, however, allow for emergencies. If you must make an emergency phone call, ask your supervisor first. If you can't find your supervisor, ask Philip Spears, who sits over there. He'll check with Clarissa Nix, who sits over there. If you make an emergency phone call without asking, you may be let go.
The guide continues past rows of identical cubicles, pointing out inboxes and outboxes as though revealing the secrets of the universe.
All the forms in your inbox must be logged in by the date shown in the upper left-hand corner, initialed by you in the upper right-hand corner, and distributed to the processing analyst whose name is numerically coded in the lower left-hand corner. The lower right-hand corner is left blank. You must pace your work. What do I mean? I'm glad you asked that. If you have 12 hours of work in your inbox, you must compress that work into the 8-hour day. If you have 1 hour of work in your inbox, you must expand that work to fill the 8-hour day. That was a good question. Feel free to ask questions. Ask too many questions, however, and you may be let go.
They pause at the reception desk, where a young woman with a visitor badge looks up with the eyes of someone already planning her exit.
That is our receptionist. She is a temp. We go through receptionists here. They quit with alarming frequency. Be polite and civil to the temps. Learn their names and invite them to lunch occasionally. But don't get close to them, as it only makes it more difficult when they leave. And they always leave. You can be sure of that.
The guide gestures casually toward the restrooms, introducing small indignities as though reading off a menu.
John LaFontaine, who sits over there, uses the women's room occasionally. He says it is accidental. We know better, but we let it pass. John LaFontaine is harmless. His forays into the forbidden territory of the women's room simply a benign thrill, a faint blip on the dull flat line of his life.
They arrive at a cubicle to the left. Inside sits Russell Nash, a heavy-set man in a too-tight shirt, crumbs on his tie, peering over his partition with an expression that can only be called devotion.
Russell Nash, who sits in the cubicle to your left, is in love with Amanda Pierce, who sits in the cubicle to your right. They ride the same bus together after work. For Amanda Pierce, it is just a tedious bus ride made less tedious by the idle nattering of Russell Nash. But for Russell Nash, it is the highlight of his day. It is the highlight of his life. Russell Nash has put on 40 pounds and grows fatter with each passing month, nibbling on chips and cookies while peeking glumly over the partitions at Amanda Pierce and gorging himself at home on cold pizza and ice cream while watching adult videos on TV.
The guide pauses at Amanda Pierce's cubicle. Crayon drawings blanket every surface. Black and yellow circles, precise and obsessive, the work of a 6-year-old autistic boy named Jamie.
She rotates them every other Friday. Be sure to comment on them.
Then the guide's voice drops. Not in volume, but in something else. Something darker seeps through the pleasantness.
Amanda Pierce also has a husband, who is a lawyer. He subjects her to an escalating array of painful and humiliating sex games, to which Amanda Pierce reluctantly submits. She comes to work exhausted and freshly wounded each morning, wincing from the abrasions on her breasts, or the bruises on her abdomen, or the second-degree burns on the backs of her thighs. But we're not supposed to know any of this. Do not let on. If you let on, you may be let go. Amanda Pierce, who tolerates Russell Nash, is in love with Albert Bosch. Albert Bosch has eyes only for Ellie Tapper. Ellie Tapper would walk through fire for Curtis Lance, but Curtis Lance hates Ellie Tapper. Isn't the world a funny place? Not in the ha-ha sense, of course.
The guide steers wide around a particular cubicle, lowering their voice for the first time. Inside sits Annika Bloom, young, still, her dark eyes fixed on nothing.
Annika Bloom sits in that cubicle. Last year, while reviewing quarterly reports in a meeting with Barry Hacker, Annika Bloom's left palm began to bleed. She fell into a trance, stared into her hand, and told Barry Hacker when and how his wife would die. We laughed it off. She was, after all, a new employee. But Barry Hacker's wife is dead. So, unless you want to know exactly when and how you'll die, never talk to Annika Bloom.
Across the aisle, a young man with wild eyes hunches at his desk. This is Colin Heavey. He was warned.
At last year's Christmas potluck, he felt sorry for her when he saw that no one was talking to her. Colin Heavey brought her a drink. He hasn't been himself since. Colin Heavey is doomed. There's nothing he can do about it, and we are powerless to help him. Stay away from Colin Heavey.
The kitchenette, a humming refrigerator, and standing before it, a gaunt man with hollow eyes clutching a brown paper bag that doesn't belong to him. This is Barry Hacker.
Barry Hacker, who sits over there, steals food from this refrigerator. His petty theft is an outlet for his grief. Last New Year's Eve, while kissing his wife, a blood vessel burst in her brain. Barry Hacker's wife was 2 months pregnant at the time and lingered in a coma for half a year before she died. It was a tragic loss for Barry Hacker. He hasn't been himself since. His wife was a beautiful woman. She was also completely covered. Barry Hacker did not have to pay 1 dime.
The guide's voice takes on a quality that is no longer entirely corporate.
But his dead wife haunts him. She haunts all of us. We have seen her, reflected in the monitors of our computers, moving past our cubicles. We have seen the dim shadow of her face in our photocopies. She has left messages in the receptionist's voicemail box, her voice echoing from an immense distance within the ambient hum. And beneath the voice, beneath the tidal whoosh of static and hiss, the gurgling and crying of a baby can be heard. In any case, if you bring a lunch, put a little something extra in the bag for Barry Hacker.
The tour arrives at a door that's always open. The office beyond is a shrine to penguins, every surface covered in black and white. This is Gwendolyn Stitch's office, and Gwendolyn Stitch is the heart of this place.
Gwendolyn Stitch sits in that office there. She is crazy about penguins and collects penguin knickknacks. Penguin posters and coffee mugs, penguin stuffed animals, penguin jewelry, penguin sweaters and socks.
Good morning. Happy hump day, everyone. I brought Danish, cherry and cheese. Help yourselves.
She organizes the annual Christmas potluck and is in charge of the birthday list. Gwendolyn Stitch's door is always open to all of us. She will always lend an ear and put in a good word for you. She will always give you a hand, or the shirt off her back, or a shoulder to cry on.
The guide's voice lowers. The smile doesn't change, but something behind it does.
Because her door is always open, she hides and cries in a stall in the women's room. And John LaFontaine, who, enthralled when a woman enters, sits quietly in his stall with his knees to his chest. John LaFontaine has heard her vomiting in there. We have come upon Gwendolyn Stitch huddled in the stairwell, shivering in the updraft, sipping a Diet Mr. Pibb and hugging her knees. She does not let any of this interfere with her work. If it interfered with her work, she might have to be let go.
The guide moves to the next cubicle with the same measured stride, the same clipboard, the same tone, as though the next piece of information is no different from the coffee pool.
Kevin Howard sits in that cubicle over there. He is a serial killer, the one they call the carpet cutter, responsible for the mutilations across town. We're not supposed to know that, so do not let on. Don't worry, his compulsion inflicts itself on strangers only, and the routine established is elaborate and unwavering. The victim must be a white male, a young adult no older than 30, heavy-set, with dark hair and eyes and the like. The carnage inflicted is precise. The angle and direction of the incisions, the layering of skin and muscle tissue, the rearrangement of visceral organs, and so on. Kevin Howard does not let any of this interfere with his work. He is, in fact, our fastest typist. He types as if he were on fire. He has a secret crush on Gwendolyn Stitch and leaves a red foil-wrapped Hershey's Kiss on her desk every afternoon. But he hates Annika Bloom and keeps well away from her. In his presence, she has uncontrollable fits of shaking and trembling. Her left palm does not stop bleeding.
The guide pauses, adjusts their glasses, and delivers the next instruction with the same cadence as explaining the voicemail system.
In any case, when Kevin Howard gets caught, act surprised. Say that he seemed like a nice person, a bit of a loner perhaps, but always quiet and polite.
Not if, when. As though his capture is just another event on the office calendar.